Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
And this is Steve.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Terracotta Army. We'll also be talking about some games that have been on our table this week, including Clank Catacombs, Draftosaurus, and Wingspan Asia. But before we get into all of that, I asked a poll this week on Twitter, which I do every week. And in fact, I also asked it in our new Facebook group, or a Facebook group that's been around for a while, but that I just started, marketing a little bit. So if you are not on Twitter and you're on Facebook instead, you can find the Facebook group of Board Game Hot Takes. Come join us there, and I'll be asking this weekly poll there every week, and you can respond to it, and we may read some of your comments. This week, I asked the question on the poll, do you plan to take advantage of holiday sales? So I asked this question right before Thanksgiving. So if you're listening now, this will be after Thanksgiving, but you missed Black Friday, all that stuff. But I was kind of curious if people were doing some discount shopping for board games. So I said, do you plan to take advantage of holiday sales like Black Friday, Cyber Monday to buy more games for yourself? The options I gave, yes, answered 25%. I'll be watching them was 45%. Just for gifts was 3%, and no was 27%. How'd you guys answer this poll?
I put no. Two reasons for that. One is that I'm just constitutionally opposed to the idea of a bunch of corporations telling me when I'm supposed to do my shopping. I hate that idea. I mean, I know that that's kind of the nature, that is the nature of business, but it just drives me crazy, the whole Black Friday thing and all that. And the other is a much more practical reason that I'm just not buying a lot of new games. I got a couple of Kickstarters that are coming in, and that's kind of keeping me in enough new stuff that I don't really need to go out and buy anything new. So chances are, unless something really interesting pops up at a really good price, I'm probably just going to pass it by.
I also said no. Primarily, I'm just not a sale shopper. When I want to buy something, I generally buy it. Otherwise, the price isn't particularly an encouragement for me.
I said I'll be watching them almost every year for the last several years. That Thanksgiving would come and pass, and then it'd be Black Friday, and I never do any Black Friday shopping, but I tend to stay up later than my family, so I might have a couple drinks on Friday afternoon, and then it's late, I'm a little intoxicated, and I just decided, let me go check out those sales. And I'm always browsing these websites and seeing tons of sales, and I'll add like 53 things to my cart. And then I'll ultimately not ever buy anything. This year, I didn't even do that. I didn't even go shopping at all. I just completely forgot about it on Black Friday. So I did not end up buying anything this year. I've watched in the past, but yeah, I've never done any board games on Black Friday sales. So,
although I got to say, I've had some great memories of buying games after having too many drinks.
Right.
I think there was one Friday night I was sitting around. I was about 3 or 4 beers in, and I bought pretty much the entire Stonemaier back catalog. And I think the reason why I own about 15 boxes worth of Gotham City Chronicles is because of Jack Daniels.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you read the responses on this question, either on Twitter or on our Facebook group, a lot of people found some fun and interesting sales. I'm not going to read them all here, but if you want to check out what some people found and how they did some shopping, you can check it out on our groups on Twitter and on Facebook. Generally, if there are some interesting comments, we will read them here, but I don't need to just list out all the games that people bought for a Black Friday sale. But it was interesting. I was kind of curious how much people were shopping. Sounds like people got some good deals. So congrats, everybody. Hope you enjoy those newly bought holiday games. Well, let's jump into a description of Terracotta Army.
In Terracotta Army, 1 to 4 players are artisans, putting the bling in the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. And back in the 3rd century BCE, that meant clay soldiers, and lots of them. The more the better. After all, the emperor would need an army to command in the afterlife. But the real Terracotta Army contains over 8,000 handcrafted soldiers. Players in this game won't be doing anything that grand, but whoever does the best job of outfitting the burial site will earn everlasting glory and lots of endgame victory points. This is a worker placement game that takes place over 5 rounds. In each round, players will take turns placing their workers on the outer ring of a circle made up of 3 concentric rings, with various actions and benefits lining each ring. After choosing a spot, the player will then undertake the 3 actions associated with that spot, 1 for each ring. The 2 inner rings will also move throughout the game, sometimes because a player chooses to rotate the rings, and sometimes just because the round ends. but this constant motion results in a nearly endless number of possible action combinations. By placing their workers in the most auspicious spots, players will be able to get clay to sculpt with, coins to make purchases, opportunities to hire masters who will provide immediate and ongoing benefits and income, and a number of other actions that I'm not going to get into any detail here, but we'll be talking about during the review. Suffice to say, they're all designed to help players achieve their ultimate goal of sculpting terracotta warriors that they'll place in the grid shaped tomb on the shared game board. During setup, 5 randomly selected end of round goals will be selected and placed on the board. And at round's end, players will score points based on these goals. They could range from having the most clay, to having the most warriors in a given quadrant of a tomb, to having the most coins. After the 5th row, players will do end of game scoring, which is essentially the same as end of round scoring, with a few other twists thrown in. And the player with the most points will be the winner. Terracotta Army was designed by Przemysław Fornal and Adam Kopinski and is published by Board and Dice.
All right, well, we'll get this kicked off. Tonight was our first time, everybody's first time playing this game. And Steve is with us tonight because Adam is unfortunately dealing with some family illness. So Steve is joining us today for his takes on this particular game. So let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms, and I'll just talk about the first mechanism. I think it's the most standout thing here, although there's a number of interesting ones, and that is this action selection wheel system. As Chris mentioned in the description there, you basically have 3 different wheels, a ring on the outside, a middle ring that can move, and an inner ring that can move. And so this is going to line up 3 different bonuses you can get. You're going to basically, it's worker placement. You're going to take a worker, stick it on one of the spaces, and then activate those rings from the inside out. Before you do that, you can pay 2 coins to rotate one of those 2 inner rings and change some of the options you got there. And this was really interesting. It did lead to a lot of analysis paralysis, I would say, long turns to think through what are the 3 actions you're going to take? How can I move these around? All of that stuff, but fun, really fun decisions here. I think as far as worker placement goes, it adds some really unique decision points here, right? You're placing a worker like many worker placements, but you're not just getting one thing, you're getting some weird combination of 3 different things. That was great. I loved it.
Oh boy, did I have a love-hate relationship with this mechanism. On the one hand, I totally agree. They created some really awesome combinations. I loved having the opportunity to tweak it, to spend a couple of coins to rotate one of the circles, to think about all the great things that I might be able to do. All of that was great, and the choices were really interesting. But Tim, I think you're absolutely right in that the analysis paralysis set in hardcore. And part of the problem is you could plan out your turn, but you couldn't actually really plan that turn out until the person before you went, because they might rotate one of the rings or they might take a spot that you needed or something like that. So you kind of had to wait until right before your turn to start thinking through it in a way. I mean, you could do some planning, but I found that a lot of the time I had a plan in mind, and then I had to completely start over again when I saw what the person in front of me had done. And so I think what that ended up leading to a lot of times were some very long turns. And I did feel, especially as we got farther into the game, it started to drag a little bit. Now, part of that might have been attributable to the fact that we were playing this on Tabletop Simulator, and I'm sure that slowed it down. But it did seem like there was a lot more thinking time going on there as well. And the one other thing I'll mention, not a complaint, but just a frustration, with every set of 3 actions, it always felt like there was one action there that I just couldn't take advantage of. And I hated that. I loved it and hated it. It was a challenge, but man, it was frustrating. You always want to be efficient, and sometimes you just couldn't do it in this situation.
You mentioned not being able to take advantage of some of the actions, and the wheel's kind of laid out in a specific manner. The inner wheel actions you can almost always take because generally they give you resources. The exception being that is also where you build your terracotta army at. But generally you can take the action. And if you can't, the 2 inner rings do let you take coins or clay as an alternative. The second ring is largely about utilizing your masters, which was a really interesting mechanic that comboed with the wheel, or gave you money or clay. So those you could usually take, not necessarily the most effective combo, but you can usually do them. The outer ring was very difficult to use. It was mostly building specialists. And the specialists require not only coins, but also the appropriate weapon. And those weapons also are being used for your warrior placement bonuses. So it was very hard to always have the right combination of weapons and gold and the appropriate place to put the specialists. So those did not get utilized a lot, and you don't get a bonus if you don't use those. So that was a little frustrating, but I think I kind of got over it by the end of it. Just like didn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I agreed. It's disappointing when you can't use all those actions, but when you could, it was awesome, right? It felt like a huge turn. And by the end, when you couldn't, you're just like, okay, you know what? I got the two inside actions. I just have to live with it. Steve mentioned the masters, which are these mechanisms where you can basically pay coins to hire a master that gets you a one-time benefit, but then also gives you some kind of income at the end of each round. That was really fun as well. It was interesting because not only did you have to, trigger that master the first time on one of the inner spaces and pay for it, but the cost to do those escalated every time you did it. And so, you could activate all six, but by the end you're paying 6 coins to activate one, and that's pretty expensive. So you probably weren't going to have all of them. I think all of us had 3 or 4 activated by the end of the game. But then in the later turns, if you activated one, then you got it for free. So all of a sudden, then you had a lot more interesting and free actions you could activate. So that was a cool engine building mechanism here, and it was interesting that our games really kind of played out different from that mechanism. Like Steve had this one that would let him reactivate the inner wheel that I don't think Chris or I ever got, and so Steve was kind of doubling down on some of these cool actions at the end that I just couldn't activate it at all. And I had a couple that Steve didn't have, so it was cool to see that difference occurring, and I thought that was great. That was a really neat way to do it. One of the interesting things about this game too is that you got this engine building, but nobody has their own player boards. And maybe this component discussion, but that was kind of unique too. Like everything you're doing is just on the main board. You're not activating anything on your own space other than you're pulling some resources down there. But that was it was pretty neat. It was very streamlined.
I like the Masters as well because that was the engine building aspect of the game, and it really could drive how you proceeded throughout this. For example, at the very beginning of our game, there was one of the Masters allows you to take clay that has been deposited in warehouses and is dry, and take that to use for your own building. And there were 2 spots that had built up to I think 7 or 8 pieces of clay, which I mean that's a huge windfall, especially early on in this game. And I was looking at that master. Steve snatched that master out from underneath me, got all those clay, was able to use them. And at that point, that strategy just didn't make any sense to me at all anymore. There was no point in doing that. And so I moved on to something else. And I think I never actually ended up using that master at all. So a huge amount of difference in how you approach the game, depending upon, something as simple as one turn and how you do or do not secure a master. But another thing that Steve mentioned that I wanted to talk about a little bit were the specialists. I thought that was really interesting. And I think that also leads to a little bit of a discussion about the actual tomb itself, because this large shared board is made up of a couple different areas. There's the master's area. There's the area where you have the concentric circles that you use to choose your actions. But then there's the actual tomb itself, which is a grid, and you're placing these warriors out on the grid. And the ones that you're placing as part of your standard turn that you're using your clay for, they're yours. You put a base on them. And then for all the various scoring things that you're going to do throughout the game, you're going to look at your warriors that have your base of your color. But then there's the specialists. They don't belong to you specifically, in most cases at least. But what they do is they provide different benefits, such as a multiplier, or they may expand the reach of a particular warrior that you have out there. And I thought they added a really interesting dynamic to the game because even though you didn't own them, they could really benefit you, but they could also potentially provide some benefit to the other players as well. And that created some really interesting cat and mouse scenarios.
Yeah, one of the interesting mechanisms in this game is that the majority of the scoring is actually controlled by the players, not just what categories of scoring you work towards, but who scores, how much they score. Other than the end round and end game bonuses, the majority of the scoring is dictated by the placement of the investigators. That's not the right term.
Inspectors.
Inspectors, that's it. Yeah. So one of the actions you can take through the wheel, and there's also one of the warrior bonus actions, is moving the inspectors. And the inspectors score. The tomb is a grid, and so there's an inspector on the bottom and an inspector on the side, and you can move those around. And essentially, the majority of the round scoring is based on the inspector intersection and the specialists. So you decide where to place the specialist. You decide as a player whether you want to try to interact with those specialists, right? Do you want to put your warrior where you think the inspectors are going to be at the end of the round, or do you want to put them next to a specialist that's going to score you points? You decide which specialist you want to put out on the board. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, in this tomb area and the way that you choose where the inspector is pointing and where you place the warriors that you put out and where the specialists are out and all that stuff, there is so much interaction there. This is like Barrage times 3, where you're kind of choosing where to place stuff, and then other people can block you out. They can move in front of you. They can move things around. They can move where the scoring points. But I don't know. This felt it felt not too mean. I think usually if people were moving something or placing something, it's because they were trying to get more points out of it. That we had this conversation in the middle of the game, and Steve and Chris both said, "Oh no, we definitely moved something to stop you from getting points." But I don't know. I think you just can count on it here, and it doesn't really feel like you're being blocked. It just feels like, okay, that got moved. I got to figure out a way to move it around, or I'm just going to have to, tactically change where I'm placing workers to try to score with it. Definitely hard to set a firm strategy about where you're going in the end of the game, but there are a lot of ways you can score regardless of where those inspectors are pointing. There is the end round goals, or this is kind of like a Gaia project mechanism where there's a random 5 tiles set up for the end of each round, and each round is going to score differently. That was really fun. I always like that in games. There's Isle of Sky does that, Gaia Project does that. I always like where every game you're going to have different goals to go for. So that was cool. And, you could always focus on that, even if the inspectors weren't working your way. Or you could think about the end game, and you could think about, like, hey, if I get this large group of warriors and get them touching a couple other people, but I have the majority there, there's a lot of potential points there. So a lot of different ways to find points here. I think in a first game, at first, it was a little like, I'm just going to place a guy out there and see what happens. By the end of the game, it was pretty clear how impactful. And that just, again, led to the analysis paralysis, because every time you had to pick a warrior you were going to place or a specialist, it's like several minutes of like, okay, well, I could put this guy here, but then the inspector might move, and Steve's going to put a guy right there. Chris is going to put a guy there. It was some tough decisions, but I think pretty fun decisions. And it built out this really unique board presence by the end, this cluttered, messed up tomb that probably doesn't look anything like the actual Terracotta Army does.
Tim, I feel like kind of a jerk now because I've definitely felt throughout the game like I was doing things pretty aggressively.
That's typical.
Like I just want to drop a rando guy in the middle of a cluster of your people or Steve's people, just because you can't be having all those points. I've got to take that away from you. So maybe I just wasn't getting in the spirit of it. Honestly, this is one reason why I'm really sad that Adam wasn't able to join us for this one tonight, because I think he would have really liked that piece of it. He really likes player interaction. And there was a ton of player interaction in this game. Yeah. And I was constantly finding myself thinking of, oh crap, I think I see where Steve's going here. I think I see where Tim's going here. I better do something about it. But let me come back for a minute to scoring, because I think there was a strength and a weakness in the scoring for this game. I loved the end of round scoring tiles. I thought those were great. I really liked the inspectors. I thought that created this fascinating opportunity to manipulate the scoring process a little bit. I loved that. I liked the specialists and how the specialists affected scoring. What I really did not like was the end of game scoring, not the end of round scoring, but the end of game scoring, where you got into this whole messy process where you have to look at clusters of characters on the board. And first you have to clear out all the characters that aren't part of a cluster. And then you have to find the clusters and how many people are involved in a cluster. Like, in other words, how many players. And that becomes a multiplier. And then you count those up. And then there may be some way in which the specialists affect that. And I assume that after a few games, I probably would have a handle on this one and it wouldn't be quite so confounding. But my goodness, I was so confused when we were doing the end of game scoring here. And even if I did get the hang of it, I just don't think it was necessary. I think that the other scoring opportunities provided all the variety that you needed. I didn't think this needed to be in there. I didn't think it was helpful. And I thought it made the overall scoring a little bit too opaque for my taste.
I'm going to disagree. It was a little confusing because it was the first time, but I think it provided an important opportunity for scoring outside of chasing the inspectors around the board, right? Because it allowed you to create the clusters regardless of where the inspectors were. And if you got really lucky, maybe they'd overlap. But another point about scoring that we didn't touch on was the concept of dominance and presence. And I thought that was a fun little thing too. Basically, at any time there was a scoring trigger, if you had at least one thing, one warrior, one piece of gold, one piece of clay, one unit in a certain sector, you got some points, which was nice. But whoever had the most of those things, whether it was for an inspector row or an end round bonus or a cluster, they called them groups, or a specialist scoring, they got extra points. So that was a fun little balance going on there too. You could be like, well, I just need to put one thing here and I'll get some points. And so it made it worth it even if somebody had 8 things there, you only had to put one. So that was nice.
Yeah, I think that presence scoring is kind of what led us to having such a tight score at the end too. You basically could get points all the time. Is that a good thing? I don't know. It's a little bit point salady. If on a first game we all got all kinds of different points from all different places, and we end up within like 10 points of each other in a 200 plus scoring game, it means how impactful were my decisions in that game. But maybe that's not normal, right? It was the first game. Maybe sometimes you're going to get a bigger spread than that. On the other hand, it's nice that it feels like everyone had a chance. We had some at different times in the games, people were 20 points up or 20 points down, and then there were ways to come back in different opportunities. So, Chris, speaking to that end game scoring, I think my biggest complaint about it, and this is true of any game that has this much end game scoring, is just the time. It's just like the time that it takes to go through that, right? You just finished the game, you got a big climax. This was the last round. And then let's spend 15 minutes going through all the scoring. And it's like, I like that there was end game scoring that was different than it gave you a strategy to work towards instead of just the tactical, like, adjusting with the conditions of the game. So I like that there's end game scoring. I did feel like it went long. It was a lot, but I mean, I feel like that even with simple games like Cascadia, where the scoring kind of outweighs how much effort you put into the game. This was a pretty streamlined game, and yet it felt like we spent a lot of time scoring it up at the end. Well, why don't we jump into the theme and production of Terracotta Army? I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think that this was for a relatively inexpensive board game as big box games go. It's a lot going on. Lots of plastic minis in here. This cool wheel that spins around. Yeah, I thought it was a cool production.
I thought the production and the theme were both really interesting. In fact, I know that Adam Kopinski was not involved in the production of The Great Wall by Awakened Realms, but I know he does do a lot of stuff with Awakened Realms. And so I couldn't help mentally but draw a comparison here, since there's some thematic similarity there as well. But this is kind of the game that I wish that The Great Wall was. It had some of that interesting theme points, the great art, the production with the enticing minis, but it was manageable. It was manageable and it was fun and it was relatively streamlined, except for the end game scoring, in my humble opinion. I just thought it was a lot of fun looking at this game. And I'd love to play this one in the physical copy because I feel like it would be a lot of fun to put your hands on these actual pieces and move them around. And I think it suffered a lot from the fact that we were playing it electronically. It was still a lot of fun, but I think this one would really shine if you're playing it in the physical edition.
I would say that I liked a couple parts of the production. And you've already mentioned the highlights, which are the minis and the wheel. Overall, though, I did not find it to be a very attractive game. The iconography on the Masters is just unnecessarily too similar. There's 6 of them. They look nearly identical. You're like looking at the color of their necklace on this like tiny little picture and then trying to compare it to the ones on the Masters. Like it just wasn't necessary. Like you got 6 guys with goatees and the same style shirt. Like there was no reason. Like you could have made that more distinctive. Overall, no big complaints. And I did like I liked the wheel. I liked how you could grow your workers from craftsmen to artisan to artisans. I liked how you put your your warriors on the horse, kind of. That was fun. So there's definitely some fun components to it.
I can't believe that you criticized their style of shirt, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's a valid complaint. It was very hard to tell them apart. But I think if you look at the board, there was some cool texturing in the board and, just I think geographically relevant, I don't know, style in the whole production. So I thought it worked pretty well. I guess if I'm looking at the board right now and it is beiges and greens, typical Euro stuff. That's a little bit of a shame, but maybe that's what ancient China was like. I don't know.
I don't know what to say to that.
All right. Well, final question. Would you request to play this game again?
Absolutely. I really look forward to playing this game again. I enjoyed it. And I think that there were enough things in here that gave me pause. Things like the end of game scoring, which it rubbed me enough the wrong way that could become a problem for me down the road, or I might get used to it and be more comfortable with it, and it wouldn't bother me quite so much. But I'd love to play this again. I'm hoping that one of us ends up buying a physical copy of it so that we can play it at one of our cons and get a chance to actually play with the physical edition, because I think that'd be really fun. So yeah, absolutely, this is a definite want to play it again for me.
I would also definitely like to play it again. And Chris, this sounds like a great excuse to drink some Jack Daniels and order a copy of Terracotta Army so we can play it.
All right.
Yeah. I question how many times you would want to play it, because it seems like one of the interesting things is like, now that we've got the basic rules down, I'd like to play it a few more times and figure out some like really interesting strategies and combos and see how high we can push the points. I mean, we were already over 200 points, which is high as the actual point tracker goes, is 300. So it just seems like maybe after a few plays, there wouldn't be a lot of new things.
Yeah, I disagree on that because that end round scoring was so impactful. It changed how you played the game. I mean, like in this one, the second round, you got the end round scoring was based on the number of coins you had, which isn't something you're trying to accumulate any other round. So it totally changed what we were trying to do. And we happen to have three of the end round bonuses. We're just targeting specific quadrants in the crypt. When we actually set this up to play a first time, Adam joined us for about 5 minutes and then had to leave. And that one gave a lot of end round scoring based on specific types of warriors. And so it felt like completely different goals that you were going for. And I think, similar to games like Gaia Project, where, there's no hidden information, but it completely changes the strategy and how well you can pursue it. And I think there's a lot to go after there beyond the fact that, the other players are going to interrupt your strategy. There's a lot of tactical changing what you're doing. I think this game has a lot of potential gameplay in it. I also would love to play it again. I think this is a game that I could go back to a lot and could have a lot of fun with. Not on Tabletop Simulator because that's fiddly as heck and not interested in doing that there. But if somebody had a physical copy of this, and I know one of my local friends here does, so I'm looking forward to getting a chance to play it. Would love to play it at one of our cons. I agree. I think Adam would love this game. Adam, sorry you missed out, buddy. But I think this would be a good hit for you. It is the right level of resource management and planning that I like, the right level of interaction that Chris and Adam really enjoy, and not again, and not it didn't feel like a mean way to me. So I think this game is a pretty cool Euro. Does some unique things. Although interestingly, it's worker placement still. Like, how many games does worker placement get used in? It must just be such a perfect mechanism that it just works so well at giving you a menu of options and then restrictions at the same time. And here they did it in a unique way, but it's still worker placement. I think that's interesting. Really liked what this game did, and definitely offered some unique options that I haven't seen in any other games before. All right, well, let's jump into a terracotta themed cocktail and some games that have been on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. Chris, what do you have for us this week?
So first, I have a question for you guys. If you had to guess, what would you say is the world's most consumed distilled spirit?
I would have to guess Vodka.
Vodka. Okay.
Whiskey.
Whiskey. Okay. Both of you are wrong, but you probably guessed, but because of the fact that I was actually asking the question in the first place, it was probably going to be something a little bit tricky. But the answer is it is baijiu, a distinctly Chinese spirit that's the most consumed spirit in the world. Seriously, it is by volume the most drank spirit in the entire world. It's not completely unknown in the United States, but it is fairly new to the American cocktail scene. So it's very possible that a lot of people who are listening to this may have never even heard of it. Baijiu, which translates roughly to white liquor, it can be made from a variety of different grains, but it's most commonly made with sorghum. And there are a lot of different types of it that are made in different regions in different styles throughout China. And even though there are different types with different flavor profiles, it does have a reputation for having a bit of a funky flavor. This is a concept that wouldn't actually be that unfamiliar to rum drinkers, which I am an enthusiastic rum drinker, because this is a characteristic identified in certain types of rum, often called hogo, which is people think of as the funkiness that you get in some different varieties. Anyhow, the point is that baijiu is a unique starting place for a cocktail, and it's also thematically appropriate for our game tonight, Terracotta Army. And that brings us to this week's drink, the Ganbai 22, which comes to us courtesy of alcoholprofessor.com. It's a simple drink made of lime juice, cranberry juice, and baijiu. It's a riff on the good old-fashioned cosmopolitan, and it's a perfect beginner drink for someone who's completely new to baijiu. And it has the added benefit of being in the auspicious color of red, which is highly revered in Chinese culture. And so you get to have a auspicious drink playing an auspicious game, and hopefully it will lead to a fine collection of terracotta soldiers in your tomb.
I guess zero COVID lockdown does result in a lot of alcoholic consumption, and that's probably why this is the most consumed alcohol by volume at this point.
I think it goes back a little farther than that.
All right, well, that sounds really good, Chris. Let's jump into some games we've been playing this week, and I'll start. I got a chance to play several times, like half a dozen at this point. Clank Catacombs. Clank Catacombs is the latest version of the Paul Dennen design game of Clank, the deck building adventure game. Most of you who are listening have probably heard of Clank or have played it in the past, but I did want to talk about this new version of it. I'm a big fan of Clank. It's on my top 10 games of all time list. I always have fun with it. It's an interesting mix. Push your luck, deck building, a little bit of dungeon crawling, but generally just a very fun game with some interesting strategic choices you get to make. The base game of Clank basically works like this. You got a map, and you're going to have a deck of cards, your basic starter deck of 10 cards. Everyone has the same, has some very simple actions in it, some negative actions. But over the course of the game, you're going to have the opportunity to collect other cards, and these cards are going to let you move around this dungeon, spend skill points to get new cards, combat monsters, things like that. The new version of Clank Catacombs adds some really interesting changes to this paradigm. In all the old versions of Clank, you had a set board that you were looking at the start of the game. Even in Clank in Space, which had a little bit of a variable board, it was set up at the start of the game, and you could kind of see the paths you might want to go down. Clank Catacombs shifts that drastically by giving you a selection that as you're moving through this dungeon and you move off the starting tile, you have a few different paths you can go down. You have to choose which path you're going to go down, and you're going to flip a random tile off the top of a stack and then change the direction it's shifted in so that you know what rooms you can go into. But you never know what you're going to find on that tile. And there's a variety of different rooms. There could be benefits, there could be some negative things, but it just completely changes how the game plays out every game and what you're going to find out in those rooms. So that's the first interesting thing, and I love it. It is very fun. It's very fun because there's a lot of different unique benefits you can flip over. So a lot of just fun bonuses, lots of rewards that are going to happen in this game. It does a couple other things that I really like, though, that I didn't love about previous versions of Clank. Number one, in all the versions of Clank, I think, that exist out there, there's an opportunity to to buy a key in a market, and then you can use this key to get through the locked spaces in this dungeon or in the space station or whatever version of Clank you're playing. This game takes that away and instead gives you these lock picks. Everyone starts the game with 3 lock picks, but they're disposable resources. So if you move into a tunnel that has a lock icon in it, you can put a lock pick out on that lock icon, and then you can move through it, but then it's available for everyone else to move through as well. Beyond that, though, the lockpicks are also used in certain spaces to get benefits. You can move into a prison area and you can put a lockpick on it, and there are these little prisoner tiles. You get 2 of them, and they're end game points, but they sometimes are conditional end game points. So they kind of give you little mini goals to go towards over the course of the game. Or you can use it to, that's how you get major, I forget what they're called, major secrets, or yeah, major secrets. So the kind of the bigger surprise rewards. So you can use a lockpick on certain places to unlock that. And you can use lockpicks in certain places to get these secret tome cards, which are endgame points. Anyway, really fun use of that because it's a disposable resource. You can find other places to get more of these lockpicks. You can buy cards that get them for you. So that's a really fun part of this puzzle now, and changes up instead of just having a place you can't get to or some people can get through easily. It's always interesting. There's also a ghost mechanism. Some of these tiles you turn over are going to be haunted. When you turn over one of these haunted tiles, you take a white cube and you put it out in the Clank area. This is kind of the push your luck mechanism of the game, where as you make noise in this dungeon, you put your colored tokens out there and you're going to get attacked. Well, the white tokens act like the bounty hunters in Clank in Space, and they're similar to the haunted, to the ghosts in Clank Legacy. But great use of that mechanism, and it's pretty clever. The last thing I'll mention about this is that they added a way that the way you can get the relics, which is the main goal of the game. You have to get into the dungeon, pick up a relic, and get back out. In all the other versions of Clank, the cheaper relics, the less valuable relics, are always closer to the top. So you can run in, get one, and get out. This one changes that a little bit. As you flip over these tiles, if you flip over a relic tile, you're going to have a stack of relics from the cheapest to the most expensive. So sometimes you'll put a cheaper one on that first one that comes up, but some of the tiles have a little plus symbol or 2 plus symbols, where instead of taking the top relic, you'll take a couple down. And so sometimes you're going to get the opportunity to get a little bit more valuable relic earlier, but also it kind of shifts. It's you don't always have to go to the most dangerous place to get them. So the push your luck and the excitement of flipping over that tile and finding out what's available on that is always really exciting. This game is just, it's so fun. It's my favorite iteration of Clank. The Clank Legacy, of course, had the legacy elements in the story, and you can't replace that here. But as a standalone game, as a game that you're going to pull out and play, in one session, it's a blast. This is so much fun. My wife's been loving it, which I'm so excited about. Like, we played it 2 times in a row, and then all weekend she was like, we got to play Clank again. We got to play Clank again. And she never does that with games. I asked her what she loved about it, and she's just like, there are just so many fun things that happen. Every time you flip over a tile, you find a new reward you can get to. Every time you get a hand of cards that are out, you get some fun things that happen with it. So this is just an excellent version of Clank. If you're a fan of Clank, you should check it out. I happen to have moved all my versions of Clank out of my collection to other people, and this is my new permanent version. If I already had Clank, would I need to buy this? Oh, I don't know. I might after playing this now. I think I would want to replace any other version of Clank with this one. I think it's fantastic, and I definitely recommend it.
Well, Tim, I'm a huge fan of Clank, and I think you actually answered my big question, which was, how does this fit in with the rest of the franchise? Because it sounds like, other than the variable map, the sort of the secret catacombs, a lot of the differences between this version and the other versions is relatively subtle. Do you feel like this is one where you would have both versions and you might want to play them, or you need one, not the other one? It sounds like more like the latter.
The variations are subtle, but I think they're impactful. And I think everything that is changed for the better. I think it's, been a learning experience through this game system. The only reason I would choose to buy the original Clank is that there are a lot of expansions on it with a lot of different boards and mechanisms and things like that. And so that's something I would like to kind of explore a little bit more, which I've never had the chance to. But I think Clank Catacombs also has the opportunity to be very expandable. You add a new expansion that adds some new tiles, a couple new mechanisms in there, and of course the card set could change a little bit. Yeah, I think that everything that they did in here is an improvement, and so I couldn't not recommend this version over any other version of Clank at this point.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Can't wait to give it a try.
Yeah, this will definitely be coming to our next con, and I think you guys will all have a really good time with it.
Nice. I have not played a Clank game yet that I haven't loved. So on my table this week, I had a very exciting arrival in the mail. It was the nesting box with Asia expansion for Wingspan. So let me talk for a minute first about the nesting box, which, Tim, you had mentioned before, I think it was Everdell that had like the biggest storage box you'd ever seen.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how that stacks up against the nesting box because this thing's about the size of a steamer trunk, and I love it. It's huge. And of all the games I played, it's one that really does kind of need a special storage solution because for anybody who's played Wingspan, it is stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of cards. And the problem is you can't fit all of those cards into a standard. There's like these trays that you use to put the cards in, and you can't fit them all in there. So I had my stacks of cards split throughout 3 or 4 different boxes from the different expansions I had. And if I wanted to switch up, I'd have to go get another box to go find some cards, whatever. It's just, it was a mess. And so this lets you stack all of that stuff into one box. And it's a pretty effective storage solution as well. It's nicely organized. It's not just a big box. It's got some excellent trays inside of it. It's got good places to store the extra pieces, and it's tailored to the game. So I really appreciated that. And the way that they're selling it right now at Stonemaier, you can get it with the Asia expansion, which is the newest expansion to the series. Now, let me talk about the Asia expansion for a second. A lot of the other expansion content that we've seen has essentially been just new cards. I know that the Oceania expansion added nectar as a food that you can use, but that's a minor change. And some of them added new mechanisms. I think there was a new mechanism that came in the European expansion that there were certain things that would happen between rounds that might score you some extra points. I don't remember the details, but they were again pretty subtle minor changes. In Asia, they actually added a new play mode called Duet, and it's a game that's really tailored around 2 players. And I think that's kind of nice because a lot of people, myself included, end up finding themselves playing games like Wingspan a lot of times with a significant other, so it's 2-player games. And the game is very familiar, even in duet mode, but it's also different enough that I think it's going to be a lot of fun to play. Now, I have not gotten through a full game of this yet. I basically got it out on the table and learned enough about it so I could talk intelligently, or at least somewhat intelligently, about it tonight. But essentially, what you're doing in duet, you are operating much the same as you do in a normal game of Wingspan, but in terms of the end game goals, one of the things you're going to be doing is putting these tokens out on a special board called the Duet board. And it's kind of like a map. It's roughly divided into the 3 different types of habitat that you have on your standard player mat in Wingspan. And for each circle on this, each space where you can put a token, there is a requirement, and some of them also provide a benefit. And so what you're trying to do is create these clusters of tokens that are going to score you points and might get you middle end of round scores, which is a little bit different than the standard end of round scoring that you get in the base game, which really is just about get the most birds in water or have the most bowl nests, that kind of thing. I think this might be a little bit more interesting. Just one kind of strange design choice that they made, which I really don't understand. The tokens that you put out on this map are in the shape of the yin and yang symbol. So you have a little black sort of tadpole looking thing and a little white tadpole looking thing, and each player has their own color, which made me immediately think, oh, well, it's yin and yang, and the spaces on this map are circles, so clearly they're intended to fit together, but they're not. You can only have one token on a space, so you don't actually fit them together, which made me wonder why they did the yin and yang thing in the first place. So I don't know, it's a mystery for the ages, but the game looks fun. I love the new solution for storage, and I'm really looking forward to getting this out on the table with the full complement of what feels like about 750 cards at this point.
So I'm curious, Chris, is there a lot of empty space in that box still? Because I know they are planning to make an expansion for each of the other continents if demand still exists, in 4 or 5 more years. Do they have enough space for all of that now? And so it's just kind of empty at this point?
It sure looks like it. I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's empty, but there's space available. And there was a couple nice little touches that they had. Like there's the main insert where you have some trays that fit in nicely, but then you can lift up that insert and there's an inch or 2 of storage, just open storage at the bottom. And then there's a tray that drops in on top with little handles that provides a couple more inches of storage. So you can put all your extra stuff into those spaces, and then you really do have the lion's share of the storage on the inside of the box is these different compartments for various sets of cards. So I think there's probably plenty of space in there to put future expansion content as well.
Yeah, no, and I know the new version has unique player mats that have a different look to them, and they made it so that you could actually expand the game to 6 or 7 players, I think, as well. But they're two different. Do you like the new mat? The production, the artwork on it more than the original, or do you think you'd have a preference?
I don't think I'd have a preference. I mean, the art was a little different, and it might be nice to switch things up, but I didn't see it as being particularly impactful.
Okay, cool. Well, anyway, the duet mechanisms sound really cool. I think one of the missing things in a two-player game of that is that the end round scoring just isn't very interesting with 2 players. Just it's kind of gonna wash out most of the time.
Yeah.
But that sounds really fun.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, Chris. I hope I get a chance to play it sometime soon. I love the other Wingspan games and the other expansions, so looking forward to it. Well, on my table this week is Draftosaurus. I'm going to apologize in advance for mispronouncing all of these French names. I assume most of them are French anyway. The authors of this game are Antoine Bauza, Corentin Lebrat, Ludovic Mablanc, and Theo Riviere. And this is produced by Ankama Board Games. And Draftosaurus is pretty much what it sounds like. You're drafting dinosaurs. It's essentially a set collection game. Each player starts out with a handful of various colored dinosaurs, and they are also in fun shapes. So each of the various species of dinosaurs has its own distinct color and shape. And you pick one and you put it on a space on your board that's dictated by a roll of the dice. So the active player rolls the dice. They get to put their dinosaur anywhere they want within the constraints of the board, but everyone else is forced to play their dinosaur as dictated by the dice. So either the left side of the board, the right side of the board, the upper half of the board, the lower half of the board. You can't put it where you've got a T Rex, something like that. There are 2 sides to the base game board, which give you some variety. But essentially, there's mechanisms like every dinosaur in a particular pen has to be a different species of dinosaur, or you try to put the same dinosaurs together, or you have to decide which dinosaur you think you'll have more of than anyone else by the end of the game. And there's a little special pen for that. It's just a super fun little game, definitely on the lightweight side. The variability with the 2 different boards is nice. There are also 2 expansions for this game, which I haven't played, but I'm looking forward to. And if you'd like to check it out, it is also on Board Game Arena, which is a nice little place to play because there's no setup.
This game is so much fun. We've been playing it a lot lately. It is a tiny little filler. It reminds me the most of anything that I played would be Sushi Go. Simple drafting with some unique set collection rules, but in this case, set collections based on where you place things on the board. And Steve mentioned that there are these variable boards, but like each of the regions on the board score a little bit differently. Like on the one side, the summer side of the board, there's a region where you want to place all of the same dinosaur, and the more you get in there, the more points are worth. And another region where you want to play all different dinosaurs, and another one where you want to have couples of dinosaurs. So, and another one where you want to have just a single dinosaur with no other matching ones in your whole park, and then you can score some extra bonus points. And it's just fun, quick little decisions. I think what surprised me about this first is that it plays only 2 rounds. So like Sushi Go is 3 rounds of like 7 cards each, and I kind of expected that. And in this one, you're just done at 2 rounds. So it's even quicker, but it never feels like you can do everything you want to. It's always kind of just like, oh, I'm going to push. It's a little bit of push your luck, right? I mean, you're like, hey, I want to make this set happen, but I don't remember what I've passed everyone else, or I don't know what's coming to me or what's going to come back around, but I'm going to take a chance that I can get the best scoring by placing something here. So it's light, it's fun, it's push your luck. Super adorable. I really am having fun with this game. I've only played it on Board Game Arena. I suspect that drafting in person would be a little awkward because you got a little handful of dinosaurs and you gotta like hide which ones you're passing. I don't know, Steve. Have you played this in person?
Yeah, I have just the base game. We didn't get a chance to play the expansion, but either of the expansions. But it's not too
Okay.
bad. It's a little tricky. We just played it once in person, remembering like who rolled the die last. You got to make sure you keep the die where it's supposed to be, so you remember who the next player is, and you got to pass the die when you pass the dinosaurs, but it's not too bad.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a fun one. Chris, I don't think you've had a chance to play it with us yet, but we'll have to hit you up on a game on Board Game Arena. It's a fun, cute little game.
Yeah, sounds like fun. I was just looking at the cover art online, and it's pretty hilarious. There's a picture on the front of a guy like taking a selfie with a selfie stick in front of a growling Tyrannosaurus Rex. So I like the sense of humor.
Nice. All right, cool. Well, I think that will wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you enjoy the show, we would love it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes, and you can find us on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes. And we do have a Facebook group out there. So search groups for Board Game Hot Takes. Just started kind of interacting there, posting polls and things like that. So we have a small but growing community there. And if that's your social media platform of choice, feel free to come out and join us there. Otherwise, until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Have a great time.